Welcome to the studio. Spontaneity.
What?
Spontaneity?
Yeah. So spontaneity, yes. That
This-
it's not even complete yet. We still got some stuff going up.
This is going to be the podcast setup. We haven't gotten the materials to finish it, but that's not going to stop us. So
The building thing, it's weird that the supply chain is so weird right now.
Yeah.
Like it's crazy some of the things that like you have in abundance and some of the things that you just can't get.
yeah, and when we built this, it was right before the lumber prices just skyrocketed. So
Yeah.
That was
what did I feel like Neil said a number, maybe I'm making it up, but
like 35,000.
I thought it was 35%.
Maybe that was it. I don't know.
$35.
I'm not a plumber. Mr. Jordan Weaver.
I like that we're doing this.
Yeah.
I've missed it. I've missed being here. It feels like.
Yeah. This isn't even the final form of the podcast gear or setup. So it's
Right.
only going up from here. Well,
Right.
maybe. Hopefully.
Why do we do these? What are we doing?
Well, we're talking about thinking today, I think.
Okay.
Honestly, the way this happened is Jordan called and was like, hey, I'll be in town Thursday. Do you want to do a podcast? And I was like, yeah. And then I set it up and we're recording. So
I feel like I'm learning. I mean, it's a weird one, but to feel like I'm learning that I need an outlet. I need an outlet to communicate thoughts about where things are. And like Lacey and I did the little Facebook thing the other day, and that was the first thing really we've done outside of just Sunday morning stuff in months. And it just felt like it was a season of just sort of waiting things out and letting things sort of play out, and even like praying about like, God, how do we word what it is? And it feels like just like I'm going to be 40 in the next calendar year, which is weird to say, but it feels like we're just now getting to a place where I realize why things like this matter and why they're important. Hey, what's up, guys? Oh, Jordan Lacey said, hey, guys, multiple camera angles. I'm impressed. So
thinking.
Yeah.
I mean, so that goes into the sermon Sunday.
I think, yeah. And I don't, you don't want to overstate it, but I think it may be the thing that shapes like the next course of the season. One of the things I knew for sure that I've been saying for a while is I know that Shiloh's going into a new season. I know it. You just sense it. COVID, you kind of get the sense that the COVID airplane is starting to land a little bit. And the decisions we made during a time of crisis are going to look different than the decisions in the season of like now. It wouldn't make sense. It wouldn't make sense to keep the same level of like crisis intensity going into the next season. Just logically, it's going to be different.
I've noticed for me, like the before the crisis,
Right.
and you said not sticking with it, but before the crisis, if you were to go into a crisis energy or mode,
Right.
it was taxing.
Right.
But it's almost like now not being in a crisis mode is like, oh,
Well,
okay.
and there's seasons where it's like you said, if you go into a crisis mode and everything's good, people are like, dude, calm down. That's like a conspiracy theorist. If you don't catch on when there's a crisis and there's like time to move and you're the guy who's like, we just really need to think,
Right.
It's like, no, like
Get up.
thinking is important. Yeah. Thinking is very important. Right now it's a time to act. And now it's like, it's starting to slow back down. Like, okay, how do we measure the next season? And so I can't get away from that's who we're going to target, that's who we're going to go after, that's who we're going to try to reach, is people that are, I've said it before, not being reached by a traditional church model, but people who are thinking type people who process things and have questions and genuinely want to know answers. And I think there's a lot of those kind of people. And if you look at the history of what we've done at Shiloh, it's always been, it almost feels like we've always got one foot out the door of a church in a sense. Like we do the church things, like Sunday morning, if you come to church, it looks a little different. But really, in reality, you look at the people that are starting to kind of find this place, whether it's online or in person, and it's a different demographic than you'd see maybe at a traditional church. I want to know if there's a way that we can turn the volume on that from like 2 clear up to 10. That says how do we effectively do only that, where we're only reaching people that have questions, that are wanting to learn, because we've got young men in this church that are going to become fathers and husbands, and they're going to enter the work society, and they're going to become managers, and they're going to become like leaders in their jobs. And how important would it be right now if we got to participate in the process of like, hey, what's your process on your thinking? How do you shape your thinking? You go to the Word and it goes, well, what is a proper thought life look like? Because from that, everything's gonna be distributed into the world. Right. Whatever a person is going to offer into the world, maybe you learn something, maybe you think something, and you go through a process, and through this process, you go, what I thought was this, I'm now starting to think is this. But how do you think about that? Like when things don't go according to plan, what's your process on that? What's your thinking on that? And I mean, I'm from a culture that is not, I wouldn't say that we're like the Western culture isn't known for being highly, smart. I mean, super, super smart people, but not like dwelling on the intellectual type stuff. And I feel like that's a gap that is needed. It was needed for me in my own life, desperately needed there. I needed to ask new questions, and I didn't know how. I needed to think about things differently, and I didn't know how. And so to me, it makes so much more sense that if we were to go, okay, we got through COVID, we said yes to everything for a year. Well, now saying yes to everything isn't feasible anymore. It's not possible. Right. There's an ant.
There's ants in here.
Yeah, you can have them. So yeah, I mean, when we start talking about thought, it seems like such a little small sliver, but in reality, it's everything. Everything falls under the category of thought. If there's no thinking, if you don't think about how you think, like I said, you go through the word, and what you find is that the word is full of places where it says, choose to intentionally think of things this way. So because otherwise, there's that verse that says the double-minded man is double-minded in all of his ways. He's going to be tossed around. He's never going to get anywhere. What it's saying is know what you believe and how to settle on that so that when life kind of comes in and out, you've got some solid footing. It's like the more that I dig into that, the more I'm like, wait a minute, that's a giant task.
That's like, I've heard it said, become an expert on yourself. Levi, how are we sounding good?
You guys sound good. I'm just figuring out the delay.
Okay. Yeah, no worries.
Hello, Mary Allen. We love when you go live. I've missed your podcast with Jacob. Hey, Mary, me too. Hi, Paige.
I've heard it said, become an expert on yourself. So if you're an expert mechanic, what that means is you can look at a problem and learn how to fix it.
Right.
I mean, you figure out how to fix it because you know how it works, and you can diagnose the problem and fix the problem. Then you're an expert mechanic.
Right.
So become an expert on yourself so you can feel something wrong. You can know something's wrong. You can diagnose it and fix it in yourself. And that's a huge thing, is so many people know something's wrong, feel something's wrong, but they don't know how to fix it, and they just live with it.
Thoreau, I've heard it repeated several times from other prominent podcasters, but he said, men are living lives of silent desperation. It means we're not sure how we think. We're not sure how to think. We don't know how to process. We deal with shame, guilt, ambition, anxiety, and it's so overwhelming that we don't know what to say yes to, we don't know what to say no to. If we become an expert on ourselves, that would have to include, what do we say? We know when to say no, that's not my thing, or when to say yes. And I think we can get so distracted doing church, and I'm using air quotes, church activity, that lives aren't actually changing. Nobody's finding Jesus. Nobody knows how to think about Jesus. I mean, Jesus, they're thinking according to what Jesus is rules related, and that starts to feel like an overwhelming task of like, man, if we're going to get to participate with people, and I think when you say thinking, knee-jerk, people go, you can't tell me how to think. Like, whoa, I totally agree. All I'm saying is there a way to categorize the way that you think that's important?
Yeah, we're not going to tell you how to think.
I'm not going to tell people what to fill in the blanks. I'm just going to say, because in my own life, I think about how important that was for me, and I'm like, man, if it'll do for you what it's done for us, and like I watched like you and Levi, young guys coming in, and what you thought about media has changed, but your thoughts about media have stayed the same. Like the method has changed, but the principle that brought you and Levi as a young man, you were in like beta form. You're in this seed form, and over the last few years, you watch what God's done in your life. He shaped you into these like monumental contributors. So the thread was right, but the thinking, if you didn't have that core thread of like, what do I think? Well, I think media is important. I think I can do it. That's never changed. And if you don't have solid footing in the way that you process this type of information, you become people are just tossed around on the waves.
Right.
I mean, there's nothing solid. And so what I thought was going to be like a sermon series is starting to kind of reshape how I think about how we do everything. Yeah. Yeah. And so I say like sermon series, it's like, no, wait, maybe this is like the definition of the next season. And then I'm like, But it even almost feels bigger than that. It almost feels like this may be all that we do. This literally might be all that we do. And so the action of that would be, we want to put food on people's tables. You know, we want to create a culture that is inviting, but really ultimately what we want to do is we want to give people an outlet when they come in and they go, I don't even know what I think about right now.
Right.
I'm not sure what I think about Jesus. You're like, no, this is a good spot. We're not going to tell you what to think. We're going to tell you how we think, and that might be helpful to you to sort of process through all this.
Right. You've said the phrase, like a smelling salt verse or
Yeah.
smelling salt verses. What does that mean? Like the phrase, what do you mean by that?
We were saying it a minute ago. Soren Kierkegaard was a philosopher, and he went through a phase where he would sit outside the temple or the chapel or whatever it was, and he would drink wine and smoke cigarettes and scream obscenities, and the people walking in would just, you know, like clutching their pearls, like, I cannot believe someone as a man of God would do such things. But the smelling salt moment was like, you couldn't see that and not think. Even if you're thinking like, what is that? What is going on? It's still something that triggers thought. And you see Jesus do this, where he would say something that was just so outside the accepted norms of thinking that people go, well, if I'm going to stretch my brain to include what you just said, that's going to change how I think. And he's like,
Right.
you know, that's
the point.
yeah. Catch up on comments real quick. I have a thought. Why is Jacob drinking an orange rock star? I've been gone too long. My influence is.
Who is that? Who said that?
Lacey.
Lacey? Yeah.
Lacey. If Nick,
Honestly,
if Nick
do you want to
watches
know
this, he should be
why?
bad.
It's because I went to go get Jordan yellow rock stars and they had orange, and I was like, yellow, orange, you know, they're not at all the same.
They taste like Kool-Aid to me.
We both have read the book Thinking Fast and Slow.
Yes.
And
The sister book to that is Malcolm Gladwell's Blink.
okay.
They use, it's crazy. Have you read that one yet?
No.
They use so many of the same studies. It's crazy. It's almost like they sat down and wrote the book together, but
Two different versions. Interesting. When you started talking about this, you know, the thought process, and, you know, it connected in my head of so thinking fast and slow, there's two different ways of thinking. There's the fast way of thinking where you're active and you're engaged and you're solving problems in your head. And then there's the slow, which is relaxed, you're just breathing, you're just relaxed.
right.
So, and I realized that the majority of the time I'm reading the Bible in a relaxed mindset, and I'm just reading just to read, because you're supposed to just, you're supposed to read the Bible. And then I realized, so if you did the exact same thing, you read the exact same, verse, passage, whatever, in a active mindset, like you're trying to figure out,
You don't
what
skip over
story
the
is.
stuff that
right. You're trying to
doesn't
dig
land.
out every
Yeah.
single little thing. You can completely change your perspective on that passage.
Don't you think though that that's what like a really good communicator brings out? Like when I hear somebody preach on something, like a story that I know, and they find an angle that I haven't thought of, or they view it differently, or I learn more about it, then I go back and now my interest in that story is deeper because they brought out something that I didn't know was there. And so to your point, that feels almost like a learned behavior. I don't see my kids as much as they are aging and growing up. I don't see them as going to the Bible with critical thinking per se.
Right.
But I also know that because of my presence in their life, and every time I talk about something in the Word, I've tried to just find like exhaustively what's there. They'll never look at it as being a shallow experience either. So what they're learning is not like, hey, there's a flood and there's some animals. Great. No, what does that mean? Like you hear, like Jet is 12 and he's already, because of the environment that he's living in, he's already going, but why? What did it mean? What was the second meaning to that? Like your dad is talking about that bone that's buried like second, like deeper. And from a culture, at very least, what I hope people get out of it is like when I go to the Word and I read something I don't understand, I'm confident that there's an answer there. I'm confident that something there is going to, what I hope they would say is something there is going to benefit me. If I can figure that out, that's going to shape the way that I live my life. That's going to shape the decisions I make. That's going to shape. Remember in Thinking Fast and Slow, they said when you're doing a math problem, you just write the answer out. But then if they ask you, how did you know that? That's usually where you start doubting yourself. It's that secondary thinking of like, but why? Oh crap, why? And then all of a sudden it's like that second wave of thinking comes in because, it's like everything's fine. Right name, wrong Jesus, ruined my religious beliefs. I feel like I spent all my time trying to be good, failed miserably by the way. I have missed Jesus. Brett, let me tell you this. Or just here's thinking. Here we go with thinking, right? Does that mean that you fell further away or you fell closer? Because here's what I learned about Jesus. This is probably going to be in the sermon Sunday, so if you hear it again. When Jesus tells Peter, you're going to deny me. And then Peter denies him. And Peter's like walking around, you just see it. And Peter's just like, oh, yeah. He had to have thought. Now, I'm not saying he came up to the right conclusion, but somewhere in his mind, he's like, Jesus knew that and I didn't. He saw that. He brought me with him. He let me swim to him off the boat. He lifted me out of the water. Like all of my experiences, he knew that was there the whole time. Now, it's news to Peter, but it wasn't news to Jesus. And so when you have these like moments of like, I might have been doing it wrong this whole time. That's that moment where it's like, Jesus knew the whole time I was doing the religious thing. That's when I say participating in someone's thought life, that we want to participate in someone's thought life. It's that secondary wave of thinking where you instinctively know things that you can't explain. Like the fireman that was in the house and he told everybody to get out in this book. And everybody gets out and the floor collapses. And it turns out there was a basement that wasn't on the blueprints when they went in. And then where he struggled wasn't what he knew. What he struggled with was, how did he know that? And that's where he started running into trouble. Like, well, maybe it was this. Well, maybe it was that. And that secondary line of your conscious thinking is what starts to come in and erode even what it feels like God's doing in our lives. And this is where like the bottom starts falling. I'm like, this is a never ending journey. Like if you can help people with the conscious thought about what God's doing in their life, that whatever you're stressed about, whatever things are going on in your life, when we got like I said, a ton of young people that they're going into the workforce, they're becoming parents, they're getting married, that if there's a base layer thinking of like, I know that God is for me, I know that God loves me, I know that I would take myself out of situations that God knows I need to be in if I had the power. It gives you a base layer for your decision making, because without that, your thoughts go all over the place. What's God doing? Did I mess up? Is God still for me? My fear was always, remember, can you tell we haven't done a podcast in a while? I'm all fired up, talking too much. Solomon got fired, in essence, as the king.
Okay.
Saul, not Solomon, Saul.
Okay.
Saul gets fired as the king, but he was still the king. So God had removed the blessing on his life, and then he'd placed that onto David. But Saul was still the king. And God allowed Saul to remain king, but now it was for the benefit of David. That God wouldn't install David as the king until David was where he needed to be or who he needed to be.
Right.
He allowed Saul to stay in a position that he'd been fired from. And I think that's the kind of fear that comes in that goes, well, what if that's me? What if I've messed up? What if God's left me in a position where I'm fired from? See, the thinking of that is, I think, where we've lost a lot of people in the church. I think we had a lot of people walk away because in those moments and those questions and the self-doubt and the things that comes with that, we haven't done a good job encouraging thought. We've done a really good job of encouraging behavior. I mean, I don't know anybody that lives in the United States that can't tell you a few rules about being a Christian. But if you were to ask them critical thinking type questions, I feel like that's new. I feel like that's a new thing to a lot of people, and we might have found ourselves losing people based on a lack of willingness to just sort of create a safe space for people to think it out.
So how, because I'm thinking about my process, but how do you think? And I'll use an example for, I think maybe this is how I do, but I do a lot of, I have to do a lot of research on, gear and all this different kind of stuff. And I realized that the approach that I go to it is to figure out, what do the pros use? So if, professional photographer or whatever, what do the pros use? Figure out what the gear does, and then why do they use it?
Are they using it because they use it, or are they using it because they're paid to use it? And then the distinction of why.
Or because if they're using a $10,000 camera, why? And they're like, well, because I need the $10,000, attributes, but I may not need those, so I'm not going to go out and buy the $10,000 camera when a $1,000 camera will work but I need to know why they do it.
Isn't that kind of the role of the professional in anything you do? I mean, there's the professional athletes, there's the professional teachers, there's the professional this, that, and like for everybody that does a podcast, they know who Joe Rogan is.
Okay.
But everybody wants to go to the professional, exactly to your point, and I don't mean to sidetrack you, I'm sorry, but
No, you're
I feel like everybody to some degree has the role of the professional that they look to. They go, what do you do and why do you do it? And then where am I? Does what I need match what? I mean, it's a standard. It's something that.
But it makes so much sense to me that same process can be applied to so many different areas. It's not just researching podcast gear, but reading the Bible of, okay, what are the rules that the pros are doing? Why are they doing that? And you can track down the heart behind it and the reason behind it, and then realize, okay, there, don't just never drink because of this law. Find out why don't you want to drink? Why and so on like this, and because then you can find the heart behind it, the thinking behind it.
There's what's called the stages of morality, and it's in the God-shaped heart. It's the Timothy Jennings scale, and there's 6 or 7. In essence, it's that animals can follow basic rules of morality, which is do this for a treat, don't do that for a punishment. And then it's community thinking. That's what my community does. Well, these are the rules. And eventually what you find is that people will mature or age out of just the rules into the heart of what's being said. Like if somebody goes, this is the speed limit, don't break it, or else I'm going to give you a ticket, and you don't speed for no other reason than you don't want a ticket, the heart of the speed limit isn't being met.
Right.
It's not being fulfilled. You're just following the rules, but you don't know why. Then it eventually gets to the point where you go, this is the speed limit that's been set for the amount of safety for those around me. The people that put those into place have a reason, and I'm using a speed limit. I break speed limit all the time, but like when you look at the word, if you go strictly, if you think of the word, if you think of the word as a set of rules, you miss the heart of the one that wrote it.
Right.
And I think you've got to settle on, based on the entire gospel of the word, who God is, and that's what's been. This is probably kind of personal, but I hope that's where this is eventually headed. Anyways, the podcast is, I don't know very many people who do what we're doing. I mean, I don't feel like there's like when I say professional, I don't see that there's someone who's doing this the way that I want to do it, or the way that I see it being done, or the way that we've talked about doing it. The level of honesty that we hope to be able to achieve, the culture that we're trying to reach. And so, that's where I'm thinking. And my thinking right now is, how do I continue to sort of pursue where I feel like God has called us, and not find myself so alienated or isolated. And I think, again, important questions, because what you're seeing is we're growing up in a culture of people that are finding themselves isolated. And so rethinking community, rethinking friendships, rethinking, what it means to be a part of a church. It's almost like the word church has now just been concreted in rock as something that it really shouldn't have been concreted as. How can we rethink that? How can we put thoughts around that in a way that allows us to see Jesus, see each other, not only live in freedom, but give each other freedom? That's what I'm saying. I mean, all of a sudden it feels like, who are the professionals? And I don't know anybody that's doing.
Well, I love that the approach to thinking, because before thought can happen, honesty has to happen first. Before you can solve the math problem, you need to know the variables. So if you want to take a life step, if you want to think about where your life is going, the first thing you have to do is to accurately decide on the solution. You have to first be honest with yourself about who you are and what you want and so on like that. Now, I've always thought about it where, I had a conversation with a buddy, and I said, you can do whatever you want. And then he said, no, you can't. You can't do whatever you want. This is like, the parents used to say, you can be president.
Right.
And it's like, you can't be president. And I said, well, think about it. If you wanted to be a doctor and you said, well, I can't be a doctor, I'm not smart enough. It's like, so you're telling me an average lifespan is 80 years old or something. If you spent, 40 years, 60 years of your adult life training to be a doctor, you couldn't become a doctor by 80. And it's like, well, if I had 60 years, it's like, so you can do it.
Do you think though there are people that no matter if they had 100 years, they were never going to have the capacity to do, like, for instance, NBA, the NBA. because there is a time frame associated to that, obviously. I mean, but if you're like, hey man, I'm getting real good, and you're like, yeah, you're 50.
Yeah. But I mean, the thought process is, okay, you want to be in the NFL or, in the NBA. Well, you can't just grow. You can't be tall. You can't be
Right.
genetically. You can't change your genetics. So
Yeah, that's
so
the
how
one.
could
Like you can be
you know?
anything. Well, what if I want to be tall?
Well, if it's like if you work for 20 years shooting threes or shooting, oh my gosh, what's the point where a foul
Free throw.
free throw, dude? That's embarrassing. Then if you're just like 100% with those throws, then that's valuable to a team, and they know, like, stick that guy in there, give him the rock, and he will drain a
Yeah,
three.
but I don't know. I mean, here's what's weird to me. This is what's weird to me. Being in the horse world, you can look at a horse that has the exact same shape all the way through, has all the physical attributes, and this horse is great, and this horse over here, physically from the outside looking in, doesn't look any different. This horse is great. This horse never will be. This horse has something in him that horse doesn't have. What makes Usain Bolt? I mean, he's probably not a good example because he's a specimen, but there's variables that exist that you never overcome. I mean,
Well,
but
right,
what
yeah.
we're doing right now,
Right.
what we're doing right now is where I really hope that we're going generally is how do we even think about that? I'm not even saying let's get to a
Right.
conclusion.
Right.
How do we break down the question? Because otherwise what you have is a lot of people that are, like I said, underachieving in life. They go through life and they know they're underachieving. They know that they're miserable. They know they're supposed to be doing better than this. They know that there's a life that's beyond what they're living. Where do you even start? It's so much easier to just like fall into addiction, fall into habits, fall into dead-end jobs, and never stop and examine like, hey, maybe I'm not headed to the NBA. Maybe when I was a kid, I thought this and now I think that, like what the progress of growing up. But you found yourself here today.
Right.
I mean, you find yourself where you are. So then how do you think in a way that would improve a life from today forward?
Right.
Because maybe you don't, I'm not saying that everybody has the capacity to become a doctor. I don't know that everybody has the ability to make it to the NBA. Maybe they can like find joy in a rec league somewhere, but they also find themselves. But here's what I do believe in that. You're given enough talent and ability and skill and shell to perform the job that God created for you in advance at an NBA level. Most people don't find themselves operating at an NBA level in their calling because they've never stopped to think about all the things that are present in their life, and there's no honesty.
Well, that's the second half of that thought process of, okay, so you say you want to be a doctor. Okay, it's going to take you 60 years. Well, I don't want to be a doctor if it's going to take me 60 years. So you don't want to be a doctor. What do you want to be?
Right.
Because your calling
Yeah.
is in you, and Jesus has a calling. The Lord has a calling for everyone.
Yeah.
So you start, chipping away at the marble, and pretty soon you have your, the image of who
Right.
God wants you to be. And the same thing. I want to be in the NBA, do you? Like, in what capacity? And then you start,
Well, and I think sometimes here again, these are the kind of things that have been so helpful in my life. Finally, it's like the light's coming on of how to express it. But what I found is it usually isn't the NBA that somebody was actually really shooting for. It's having a name amongst their peers.
Right.
Having an achievement that they can be proud of, but that's a shared achievement. Mm-hmm. That book by Sebastian Junger said that PTSD is lower the closer the battle is fought to home, and the reason for that they attribute that to that the whole community saw the danger and saw the effort that it took to combat that.
Right.
And soldiers that fight battles way far away from home, it's an achievement, but it's not a shared achievement.
Right.
These people are just going to the grocery store and living their lives while these people are putting it all on the line. And so back to the NBA point, people want to feel like that their achievement mattered to their people. They don't have to be known and loved by everybody, but they have to have accomplished something that gives them a name and opens the doors. The NBA, if you're a basketball player, is the obvious, easiest route to that. But what if there's another way to do that and accomplish all of those factors? I'm getting behind. Jody Webb, blessing is finding your God-given talent and then develop it. And I maybe, again, these are the kind of things. Find your God-given talent. I'm almost 40 and I'm like, man, I go back and forth on what mine even is. I mean, sometimes
I personally, I think it changes. I mean, I think
Seasons.
people change, and I think who you're supposed to be changes. Because if Jesus told me at 4 years old, you're supposed to be a mechanic, what happens when I become a mechanic?
It's to end result driven.
Right.
Well, okay, and think about this. If you're listening, stop what you're doing and listen to what I'm about to say. If God gave you the answer, what process did he just remove?
Yours.
Thinking. You don't have to think.
Okay, I was like, whose was that? Yeah.
If he gives you the end, you can stop thinking and just do.
Yeah.
And I think what we have is a generation of people who want the answer from God so bad, and it would be a death sentence if they got it, because it would remove the nature of thinking and processing. And until we get better at how we think, it's going to be hard to put our finger on what is the target.
Yeah, that's interesting. That reminded me of we got to have my dad on here sometime. But we were talking with a friend who, was in a period of his life where he's like, where do I go? What do I do? I want to know so badly.
Just want to
I just want to know,
Yeah.
Where does he want me to go? And I'll do it. And my dad said, what if he wants you to decide? And then he's like, do you think when Adam was naming the animals, it's like,
The guy was like, "Bup, bup, 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 bup.
yeah,
Don't you mean tiger?"
don't you mean? Yeah, no, he would say
Yeah.
that one's a turtle, and he's like, okay, that one's a
Yeah,
tiger.
interesting.
That one's a platypus. Oh, all right. Now we're, but it's the idea of he wants to see your creativity. That's why we have
Right.
this spirit. And so, decide, like, knowing yourself, becoming an expert in yourself and saying, this might be where I should go. And the Lord could be like, yeah, all right,
let's
now
go.
we're going. Yeah.
Brett Mills said something back before he even came to the church, back when I made Jet was little, I made him carry a bag of feed in a truck. I don't know if I, and he said, learning how to learn.
Oh, yeah.
It's important for a kid to learn how to learn. Like what they learn is almost secondary. It's that they learn how to learn. Once they become able to learn, they're unstoppable. If you never learn how to learn, you're already stopped.
Oh, yeah.
And, years later, I still think back to that of like, could we think of a God that's more like a God that's willing to hang, pull his presence back in such a way that allows us to not just be like on the floor overwhelmed,
Right.
but like a relational God, a God who will smile at you as you're trying to think about whatever. And I think there's some joy that's really been missing. Like I think about like this, and one of the things I'm most excited about is there a way to capture the atmosphere that we have when there's no cameras on and no microphones on? And
Yeah.
but again, I don't feel like I'm ever going to run out of things. I personally, I don't think I'm going to ever run out of things to think about.
Yeah. I think
But if I learn how to think, then I look forward to that instead of dreading it. I think that's what's given, like the deaths of despair numbers that have gone up, is that people don't know how to think. And if this is where God takes us and he chooses me as like a voice in all this, I was not raised, and this is not a knock. This is not a knock at all. Maybe I didn't want it. I didn't want to know how to think. I wanted to know how to fit in. I wanted to know how to get to where I wanted to go. I already had goals in my life, and I didn't really want to think. I just wanted to get to those goals. And so maybe I didn't understand the need for thinking until I saw the gaps that it was developing in my life because I wasn't. And so now it's like you learn it later. I'm well into my 20s before I even start learning how to think. And I don't even know what I think until I'm in my mid-30s, right? And so if I can turn now back around to, at any age of the church, but to like especially, to me, the heartbeat has always been young people, the young adults that are not being reached by a traditional church model. That is so close to my heart. If I could turn around and go, I get it. I know that you want to go places. Thinking is not going to hurt you in that process.
Right.
The concept of Jesus, it's not going to hurt you to consider that. It's not going to hurt you to think of Jesus differently. It's not going to hurt you to think about what does it mean to be a contributor, not a consumer. I'm just so excited about the legacy that Jesus is going to use this place to develop in lives of people that come back and go, hey, I was lost in my own head. I was lost in, if you didn't know how to even think, you don't know how to be alone with yourself. I mean, alcoholism is such a logical problem that people fall into because it's like, I don't know. And then there's the pressure. You got society going like, hey, you got to figure this out. I know, but I don't know. Like, hey, you're a dad. You got to figure that. I know, but I don't know. And now you feel like you're like ruining your child's life. I mean, the desperation for what we're talking about is so prevalent. It's right there. Like aging into a new season of life. Like, well, I don't know what that means. I'm a grandma now. Like, I didn't have a plan for being a grandma. I thought I was going to always be young and vibrant, and that was going to be my thing. And now I'm aging. Like, how do I think about that? And I know I'm supposed to be thinking different, but I don't know how. And I mean, how everybody in this nation is not battling with some level of an addiction. You look at the pornography addiction that goes on to men, and that's a shame, quiet. I don't know. No one wants to think about that. No one wants to talk about it, and the shame that's associated with it. And it's like, hey, there is a mental pandemic of, can we just take a break from all the shame and all of the anesthetizing and go, hey, what if we tried to categorize this a little bit? What if we just put out some lanes to let people sort of start asking new questions? Man, it feels like there's a never-ending amount of pursuit on that.
Oh my gosh, yeah. I mean, it makes so much sense to me when it's explained like that.
Because like the mechanic, like you said, if he's going to go on and become a mechanic, is there a way that he could think about that of like, I'm so blessed that I have something, versus I can't believe I'm just a mechanic.
Right.
The only difference between a life that's fulfilled and a life that is unfulfilled is literally the way that you allow yourself to think about it. A person who is a doctor versus a person who is a street sweeper versus there is a thought pattern necessary to say fulfillment. And when I say, I'm not saying you can provide your own fulfillment. I think what you find, if you think about it, this is just my opinion, you think about it long enough, all of a sudden the concept of God starts to make more sense.
Right.
Because it takes you out of yourself. It puts you into a position of contribution and all the things that God does in people's lives. But the exact same person, they say that like two kids raised in the same home, one doesn't drink and one's an alcoholic, and they go, why don't you drink? And he goes, because I saw my dad drink.
Right.
And they're like, well, why are you an alcoholic? Well, that's what my dad did.
Right. Just different ways of thinking about it.
And I'm not talking about your emotions. I mean, I think that's such an important distinction, because there are times I wake up and I just feel crushed. I feel like the church is going to shut down. Nobody's going to come back. This isn't going to work, and we're going to fall apart, and we're not doing a good job. And like, I can't help the emotions that I like either wake up with or like, and I want to say wake up, I mean like middle of the night, just like wide awake with just what feels like a panic attack. In those moments, what do I choose to think on? Right. What do I choose to dwell on? What patterns am I putting into place that allow me to move forward, even though emotionally I feel...
Well, this conversation right here has, I think, helped me understand the concept of taking every thought captive. Because before this conversation, I was under the impression that the enemy would put lies, and that's true. He does.
Right. But
also we do. It's like, it's easier just to think of why and excuses and the pain, and just kind of almost have a sitcom, dummy
right.
going on in your head, and just you wind up in a pool.
Right.
Versus saying, I'm not going to think about it that way. I'm going to think about it this way because it's healthier, and that's taking a thought captive and saying, no, you're not going that way. You're going to go this
right.
way. Taking a thought captive and not letting, thinking about it.
Well, and to me, that's where there are certain verses that just become lifelines. That verse where Jesus says, I'll never leave you, I'll never forsake you. Okay, so anything that goes down the road of God abandoning me, I don't have to waste time on. He's already said, he'll never leave me, he'll never forsake me. So I can take that and eliminate it from my potential worry time. I know that God's not leaving me.
Right.
I need to make sure that who God is real in my life. And, there's some things I get to dwell on with that, but I get to choose, because I don't think the enemy works as hard as we give him credit for. I think a simple thought, when we don't know how to think, a simple thought drops in our head, and it's like we're weeks. We're weeks chasing it down because it makes sense.
Yeah,
and
it makes sense. That's
he's
the
on
hard
vacation.
part. That's the hard part, is it makes sense the way you're thinking about it.
Yeah.
But it also makes sense a different way.
Every accusation, that says that's the nature of the enemy. The nature of the enemy is accusation, and the nature of Jesus, like the Holy Spirit, it's encouragement. And so there are times where it's just that simple, like, wait a minute, am I just sitting here dwelling in accusation? Am I just sitting here like saturated in accusation? Because if that's the case, that's not the nature of the Holy Spirit. Because if I'm doing something wrong, let's address that. If I'm doing something I shouldn't be doing, let's address that. But the nature of the Holy Spirit is encouragement. And if I'm being honest, I mean, I struggle with always feeling accused in some regard because it makes sense. You know, like, I mean, it doesn't matter what it is. The exact same thing that can give me encouragement can give me accusation depending on how I choose to think about it. Nothing has to change for everything to change. Everything can change if I'm careful to craft my thoughts according to the word, and then no matter what I feel, choose to standing on the word of God, standing on what it says is true, and then just making the decision like, okay, well then I'm just going to believe that that's true.
Yeah. So it'll take you 60 years to be a doctor. You could be crushed. Or it's like, hey man, that's one thing I know I'm not made to do.
Well, and I can't live for very long waking up at 2:00 in the morning feeling like I'm having dreams about all my own failure. I mean, it's excruciating. And so to go through that and go, well, whatever comes of it, I can't live like this anymore.
Yeah.
So God, I'm gonna, to the best of my ability, help me to think about it the way that you'd want me to think about it. Help me to process it, because maybe life isn't hinging on this going well the way I think it is. You know, as a mechanic, if I get this job, if I get that job, if only I could go here, or what are the professionals doing? Help me to think about it in such ways like, God, please remind me that I can't mess it up beyond what you can fix. Please remind me that you have a plan, that you're carrying me through, and my volunteer participation is what gets me there, not my wisdom and my forethought and my psychic abilities and my overwhelming ability to dribble a basketball. Like, God, just remind me in those moments that you've got a plan, and it's probably going to look different than what I thought. Remind me of that, because in the moment, man, I just am like, oh, you're going to mess it up. You're going to screw it up. Which is pride.
Yeah.
It's all up to me. It's all up to me.
I have to do it all. Yeah.
Well, and how many times, like, this is my main one, like when I start talking about thinking, is if somebody were to come up to me and go, hey, I got a treat for you. I'm like, I'm probably going to hate it.
Okay.
I'm just geared that way for someone to actually know me well enough to actually like surprise me with something that I actually want. Problem is I then assign that and then to God. God's got good plans for you. Yeah, I'm probably going to hate it. I'm like, what?
Wow.
I mean, what is that? What is
Okay.
that if not flawed thinking?
Yeah.
Like, God, remind me that you know me better than I know me. Remind me of this. Bring it to my conscience that what you do for me is good in ways that I don't even understand. You say yes to every question I would ask if I knew what you knew. I'm going to have to remember to turn my phone silent. But remind me in those moments that even when I get it wrong, you can help me get it right. And even when I ask for something that deep down I really don't want. I had a weird thing. We had the team rep in cattle at the American this year. I'm sitting there at AT&T Stadium, and like, it's a cool experience. And like the 1017 that starts as an idea in 2014, and so many people that have kind of contributed to get it where it is. And I'm sitting there and I'm like, this is cool. Don't get me wrong, it's cool. Like, they asked me to bring my dogs and work my dogs at AT&T Stadium. What? Like, there's so much about that that's cool. Yeah. But I'm sitting there and I'm like, this does not feel like the most accurate version of me. I like it. Don't get me wrong. It was fun. It was a cool experience, and it went well. I felt like it went well, but I'm like, this does not feel like some sort of pinnacle achievement in my life. As cool as that is. And so I'm like, God, you knew this all along. I mean, you've known this from the beginning, that there is a pinnacle sense of self that I don't even know. Remind me of that, because sometimes I get so locked onto my own goals and my own thing that I lose this sense of like, that I'm a creation and I'm not a creator, that I'm a creation. And in all the media stuff, all the goals that you've got in that, you are the creation, and whatever he wants to use to do in your life, whether that's going to go on to make movies or whether that's going to be to build a team over here, whatever it is, your most pinnacle sense of self will only be realized in the crushing of old thought. You know what I mean? Like, there's no way to get where God's taking you without this crushing of old thought patterns and this development of new.
Yeah. I mean, because, it's just like becoming an expert on yourself. Because instantly when you said, it's not the pinnacle, I started thinking about, okay, wait, what do I think my pinnacle is?
What would you die for? And the truth is, there's not much in life that you would die for.
Yeah.
There's not a whole lot of things in life that people would die for. But if you don't have an answer to that question, then you don't have anything that you're living for. And
Right.
that's where it's like, I need to start thinking different.
Yeah.
If you don't have anything in your life that you can say, I would die for that, then you don't love anything. I mean, that's how many people, how important does a church like this, I say church, but whatever this is, how important does a place like this become for people who are like, I don't have anything in my life that I would die for? And the desperation that comes with that, of like, I'm living an unfulfilled life without a purpose that's deeper than me.
Yeah. You don't have a stake to tie yourself to, so you're just floating around. Could it be said, because you talked about it, if you're everything, then you're nothing.
Yeah.
But what if you have nothing to die for? What if you're nothing?
Well, now, I mean, yeah.
Then it's like,
Well, my kids, I know that
still nothing.
I know that like, for instance, once I determined like I would die for my wife and kids for sure, without a doubt. Okay, well, if that's true, and I know that, then how should I be living when they're here and I'm here? How should that shape? Like, we're spending 6 or 8 hours a week in the gym, and the gym is an hour away. But why are we doing that? Well, we're doing that because if I would die for him, if I would die for Jet, and I see that this is important in his development, I see what it's doing for him, then it gives me a standard to go, well, then it's worth this. If I don't know how to think about it, then I'm like, I'm wasting my time. I'm not doing a good job. And then the joy that I get from those moments is gone because my thinking is flawed. The way that I think is flawed. Same scenario.
different way.
One is fulfilling, one is just,
Yeah. Well, now I'm excited for the sermon.
Yeah, I don't even know how to.
You might
I don't
have
even know
just
how to-
ruined it.
Well, I mean, I think they're going to hear this a lot. I mean, I think it's
Yeah.
going to be repeated deep, wide, and
It
repeatedly
should.
until people start to feel like they
It really
understand it.
should.
What if you're nothing but everything to someone? Chandros and Wilson. That's kind of a desperate place to be, because then it feels like my life doesn't matter, but I know that I can't. I know that I'm important to someone else. I mean, I think that anybody that's a parent could say that, but I think best case scenario is that you realize sort of the pinnacle peak version of self that God just sort of reveals over time. It's never what you think it's going to be. It's always different, and it always shaped. You always have to go through like your greatest fear. It's always standing between you and your actual self. It's always your greatest fear. I think you're the most afraid of your actual self is going to be in there. Wait more. The funny thing is God seems to use people who are full of questions and run a little funny much more than others. Makes a lot more room for a lot of us. That's right. Just a thought. Not me personally. No, Chandra, I agree. I understand. I think what I'm saying is living fulfilled includes, being there for the people that depend on you. There's a balance. And I think when someone draws, Chandra, to your question, I know it's not you, but I'm saying like this is the danger of that if I'm nothing but I'm everything to somebody else, that's codependency. You need that person for your sense of purpose. And if that person were to disappear, your sense of purpose disappears also. You don't know what you're bringing to that scenario. You don't know what you're bringing to the relationship. If that person is fully dependent and you find like yourself as kind of nothing, but you draw everything from your role, then that's a difference. And that's a Jamie Winship thing of my identity is wrapped up in my role. Well, I'm asking my identity or my role to give me an identity, and that's too expensive. There's got to be a balance where you go, this is who I believe God has called me to be. Peak pinnacle self sort of a thing, peak achievement. And I bring that to every role. Every place that I go, I bring that. And I offer that almost as a sacrifice to the good of those around me, so that I don't find myself isolated in self-pursuits. I already know where God's taking me, and I'm able to give that, like sacrificially. And so I didn't say that very succinctly, but
Right.
it's, again, so much of it goes back to thought.
Yeah.
Yes.
This was fun.
This is
We
good.
should do
I've
this
missed
more
it.
often.
Hey, I'm not going to do that thing tomorrow that I was going to do. So just saying. Jacob and I have both said, don't let me misrepresent your words, but here's what I understood you to say. We need to do these more often so we get better at them.
Yeah. Well, the thing I always say is, I use this for like perspective art, but if you, theoretically anything, but for videos mostly, if you want to make videos of you playing guitar, make 10 of them,
Yeah.
and then post the 11th, because there's the gap of your ability and your taste
Right.
And so if you post the first ones, you're going to be discouraged. That has nothing to do with the topic.
No. But that again, back to thinking. I'm telling you, I'm absorbing it. The people that are the most talented, naturally, struggle the most because they have an idea of what good looks like. They see people with no talent that are putting out stuff that is not good, and they fear that that's what they're going to do because they shoot so far below their own standard. It takes so much work to get to your own standard if you're talented at anything. That I think these are important. Here's why I think these are important. If it's a thought exercise, if this becomes, and this is a terrible term for it, but if this becomes almost like a thought garden where people come in and they go, I need to organize everything that's going on in here because I'm underachieving. I know that I'm capable of more in life. I know that I am a dud in my own mind, and I got to deal with that. These kinds of things become really important because it's something that you can go back, you can study, you can go back and look at, you can send it to people. You can depend on these being put out in a consistent manner where people are able to go, okay, I'm looking forward to that. Not because we tell people what to think and not because we have the answers, but it's literally just like you're building the framework so that people can go, okay, well, what do I say in that moment? Because every single person thinks. Every single person that hears this is going to have a life that is shaped by the way that they think. Every single person. Like the 1017, not everybody needs a hamburger. You know, the church, there are going to be people who don't live here that don't necessarily connect to the things that are going on. Every single person that watches this goes home, has a thought life, and their life will be shaped by the way that they think. There's not a person that listens to what we're doing that couldn't benefit from examining the way that they think. I mean, it's like all of a sudden there's this giant swath of people. I'm like, okay, then that really clarifies a lot of things as far as our approach. Yeah. Podcasts become just incredibly necessary for this.
Yeah, it would be more beneficial to your life to like pause and think.
Absolutely. Like, why is that so hard to tell people? Like, your life will be better if you think. Well, I don't know how to think. Well, neither did we. We can kind of tell you what worked for us, but at very least, I mean, the effort to think is worth it. That's an effort that's worthwhile.
Right.
Otherwise, what's your option? You're literally reacting. You are sitting, reacting to whatever life sends down the pike, and you're not improving your situation. You're not improving your life. You're not making your world better with your decisions because you're already not thinking. You're literally just hoping somehow out of the cosmos comes a life. You win the lottery. Well, guess what? It doesn't work. It still doesn't work. If you don't learn how to think, I mean,
be
hands
proactive, not reactive. That's in the 7 habits.
This
was great.
Loved it. I'm excited to be back. Excited to be doing these again.
Yeah. You going to be around next week?
Yes. But we're driving back because, for you guys that haven't heard, I had a horse that had surgery, so we got to stay an extra week. So, yay.
Well, you will be around for the foreseeable future.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Can these right here, is this going to get downloaded onto the podcast app?
Oh, yeah.
Good. Okay. Yeah. Because I think that's going to be, if I was guessing, that's probably going to be, in my mind, if there are people like me, that's probably where most of this is going to be.
Yeah, absolutely.
Processed.
Cool.
So.
Well, thanks everybody for joining in. Levi, how many people were around?
I think we're at 20 right now.
That's great.
Averaged about 20.
We're doing this during work hours, and I think
That's
the
true.
thought was like, hey, we're giving you something to do while you're at work.
How it started was we were going to do it, I don't know, in the evening 6 or something, but then Jordan showed up and we started talking, and it was like, we stop talking.
Yeah, I had to tell them to save the content.
Yeah,
so.
save the content. All right, well, thanks everybody for showing up, and
maybe we can talk. Jake, what are you doing tomorrow? You're trying to wrap it up.
No. I mean, I will be working tomorrow.
People work hard to keep their physical self in shape. Work to keep your... Yeah, exactly, Keto. That's exactly right. Like, we could all be a little more disciplined. Okay, well, if tomorrow works, let's do it tomorrow because my plans that I had are now not happening, and so maybe we'll be back tomorrow.
Let's do it. Well, thanks everybody for joining. Have a great rest of your day. Bye for now.